Though she did get some traditional counseling, Elizabeth says it was the simple things, like her music, that gave her the most comfort.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're showcasing 10 missing person stories that concluded with justice being served, long-awaited reunions, or happy endings for the parties involved.
This was all about us coming together for like a greater purpose of community and love.
Julian Hernandez. In this case, a simple college application uncovered a 13-year-long ruse. In August of 2002, young Julian Hernandez was taken by his father, Bobby. Bobby had left behind a note for Julian's mother, saying only that he had taken their son. No other details were given, and father and son seemingly disappeared into thin air. They had actually gone to Cleveland and developed new identities, with Bobby obtaining a Social Security card under the name Jonathan Mangina.
This is the house where young Julian Hernandez was living with his dad, a stepmom, and a little stepsister. He was an honors student, headed to college in the fall, and then his world came crashing down with the discovery that he was missing, and he didn't even know it.
The ruse finally ended when Julian applied for college in 2015. A school counselor discovered that Julian was legally missing and notified authorities. 19-year-old Julian, who has forgiven his father, was then reunited with his mother, and Bobby was sentenced to 4 years in prison.
Who wants to talk about all the bad things he's done, and I think that he's done a lot of good.
Jan Broberg. Today, Jan Broberg felt is a professional actress, having found success on stage and fame on the WB's Everwood, in which she portrayed Nurse Louise. Unfortunately, Broberg suffered a harrowing childhood that involved multiple kidnappings. Back in 1972, Broberg's parents met the Berchtold family through church. Broberg quickly developed a father-daughter relationship with Robert Berchtold.
Berchtold and Brobergs became friends, and they trusted each other, and that's just the way Bob Berchtold wanted.
Unfortunately, Berchtold kidnapped Broberg and took her to his trailer home in Mexico.
I don't think he's kidnapped her. He's just gone someplace with her. And he had to drill that into our minds. He kidnapped her.
She was eventually rescued, but then kidnapped again 2 years later, and the now teen proceeded to live with Berchtold in California for 4 months. She was eventually rescued by the FBI, and her story was later turned into the Netflix documentary Abducted in Plain Sight. Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Gina DeJesus. This is easily one of the most famous kidnapping stories of our time, having attained fame through its dramatic conclusion. Between 2002 and 2004, a man named Ariel Castro kidnapped the 3 women off the streets of Cleveland by offering them lifts. They remained in his house for roughly a decade and were subjected to various forms of horrible torture. It wasn't until May 6, 2013, that Barry saw her chance of escape. Castro had accidentally left a door unlocked, and Barry was able to contact passing neighbors.
So we kick the bottom, and she comes out with the little girl, and she says, "Call 911. My name is Amanda Berry."
They helped Barry and her daughter escape the house, and she telephoned the police to report the kidnappings, after which the other 2 were rescued. Castro was arrested that same day, and he would later take his own life in his detention cell.
I spent 11 years in hell. Now your hell is just beginning.
Lucy Ann Johnson. In 1961, Lucy Ann Johnson disappeared from her home in Surrey, British Columbia, Canada. Bizarrely, it wasn't until 1965 that her husband Marvin reported her missing. This made him a prime suspect in her disappearance, but no evidence of wrongdoing was found. In 2013, Johnson's daughter Linda initiated her own investigation, which led her to a small territory called the Yukon where her mother previously lived. With aid from the local media, Linda met a woman named Rhonda, who claimed that Johnson was also her mother. Turns out Johnson had left Marvin due to domestic violence, but he prevented her from taking her 2 children along. She then relocated back to the Yukon, where she remarried and had 4 other kids. Brian Anthony McCain II, aka Busybone. Today, Brian Anthony McCain II, also known as Busybone, is a Grammy-winning musician best known as a member of the rap group Bone Thugs-n-Harmony. However, his life took a dramatic turn in 1981 when he and his sisters were taken by their mother's boyfriend. Deceived into believing that their mother and grandmother had died, the siblings were transported all over northern Oklahoma. Eventually, they settled on a reservation in Kaw, Oklahoma. In 1983, the TV film Adam was broadcast, which featured photos of missing children before the end credits. One of these was McCain. His babysitter recognized the picture and promptly contacted the authorities. This led to McCain and his sisters being reunited with their mother.
I went through a lot of things as a kid, and I think that, it helped me become who I am.
Natascha Kampusch. On March 2, 1998, Natascha Kampusch left her home in Vienna, Austria for school and disappeared without a trace. Police launched a massive investigation searching many vehicles, but they couldn't find her. Kampusch had been abducted by communications technician Wolfgang Priklopil, who confined her to a cellar in his home.
I didn't know what was going to happen. In that moment, I thought it was the end.
She remained under captivity for 8 years, during which she was assaulted by Priklopil, both physically and sexually. In 2006, while cleaning Priklopil's van, she ran outside and alerted neighbors, who called the police.
It was an enormous feeling of joy that cannot be compared to anything else. You see all the possibilities laid out in front of you.
That night, Priklopil decided to end his own life rather than face justice. Kampusch later released books on her experience and was briefly a talk show host. Her story was immortalized in the 2013 film 3,096 Days. Michelle Whitaker. South Carolina woman Michelle Whitaker went missing in August of 2002 after a friend gave her a lift to a truck stop.
Is she walking around somewhere? Is she okay? Or is she laying in a ditch somewhere?
I don't want to go to my grave not knowing what's happened to my daughter.
Her case later turned into a homicide investigation, and police suspected a man named Jonathan Vick. Vick was the boyfriend of Whitaker's co-worker, and she had also gone missing. However, police were unable to prove that Vick killed Whitaker. The case went cold until 2008. An Oregon woman was watching a Forensic Files episode about Vick when a picture of Whitaker flashed on screen. The woman recognized Whitaker as her neighbor and contacted the authorities. Her neighbor was indeed the missing Michelle Whitaker, and she later told her family that she had fled South Carolina to start a new life in Oregon.
Still asleep, and the phone rang and I answered it, and it was Alan Wood from the police department. He said, "We found Shelley and she's alive."
Amanda Eller. Yoga teacher and physical therapist Amanda Eller decided to go for a hike through the Hawaiian wilderness. She never returned home, and her boyfriend quickly reported her missing. Her vehicle was found abandoned near Maui's Kahakapau Trail, but there were no signs of Eller. She had accidentally wandered off the trail and found herself in the middle of the remote wilderness. When it was obvious that help wasn't coming, she was forced to live off wild plants, berries, and rainwater. After over 2 long and grueling weeks, Eller was finally located by a search party and rescued via helicopter.
The last 17 days of my life have been the toughest days of my life. And it's been a really significant spiritual journey.
She was in surprisingly good condition and was treated at a local hospital for a fractured leg.
I'm just the girl that got lost in the woods, and you guys showed up hard. This is true aloha.
Elizabeth Smart.
Violently ripped from her own home and her own bed in the middle of the night.
Back in June of 2002, a man named Brian David Mitchell broke into the Smart household and abducted teenager Elizabeth Smart from her bedroom. Her sister, Mary Catherine, was also in the room at the time of the abduction, but faked being still sleeping. Elizabeth remained with Mitchell and his wife for the next 9 months. Mary Catherine suddenly realized that the man who took her sister was the same man who had worked on their house as a general laborer one day. A sketch of the man was drawn up and released to news outlets. One day, while walking in Sandy, Utah, several eyewitnesses recognized Mitchell's face and notified police of his location. He and his wife were successfully captured, and Smart was finally rescued.
The scariest night of my life happened 11 years ago.
She's sharing her story to help other victims of abuse.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. JC Dugard.
I don't see that ugly, broken child I was. No, I don't see her.
JC Dugard was tased and snatched off the street while approaching her school bus on June 10, 1991. The perpetrators were husband and wife duo Philip and Nancy Garrido. Despite numerous people witnessing the kidnapping, the trail went cold, and no one heard anything of Dugard for the next 18 years. In that time, Dugard was consistently assaulted by Philip Garrido and bore him 2 daughters. The case was finally broken by a special events manager named Lisa Campbell. Garrido was visiting UC Berkeley with his 2 daughters, and their, quote, erratic behavior caught Campbell's attention. After getting his name through the booking of an appointment, she notified the police, which eventually led to Garrido's arrest. Dugard was finally rescued and reunited with her mother on August 27, 2009, now almost 30 years old.
Do you worry at some point they'll want to see him?
I want them to make their own choices in life, and if that's something that they need to do, then
Really?
you know.
You'd be okay with that?
I wouldn't be okay with it, but I wouldn't not let them do it.
Which missing person story did you find to be the most hopeful? Let us know in the comments. Check out these other clips from WatchMojo, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.